Such an interesting subject that I decided to share with you all this evening, flower essences for burnout and compassion fatigue. And I'm going to venture to guess that the majority of folks listening and watching right now are probably feeling either burnt out or compassion fatigue, or a combination of the two. And or if you're not, perhaps someone in your life is. And this is a kind of a very common theme right now, especially after the very interesting last 18 months that we've all experienced together. So I just want to begin by saying thank you for coming and for showing up and for recognizing that perhaps you feel burnt out or fatigued or have a lack of compassion for yourself or others, and that is a very normal feeling to have right now. And I want to assure you that I'm with you 100%. I spend a lot of my time teaching. Most of my days I spend teaching. And today, when I was putting this program together for you, I thought, wow, talk about taking your own medicine. Everything that I was writing about, everything that I was reading and sharing is exactly where I feel deepest in my heart right now. It's a deep feeling of being very burnt out and exhausted and having some real first time in my life experience with compassion fatigue. So if that's a new phenomenon to you, we'll talk more about that as we move into it. The one thing that I know for sure that has always been such beautiful, positive, powerful medicine for me in my lifetime, for myself and for my family and my friends, my students and clients and customers, is flower essence therapy. And so this is such an easy, accessible, beautiful, simple, safe way for us to access health and wellness when we're feeling emotional burdens or emotional overwhelm. So again, I thank you all for being here this evening and for sharing yourselves with us. So my name's Lupo, and I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight to talk about burnout and compassion fatigue. This photo, my friend Heather used to create a little advertisement for this class. And this photo was taken 2 years ago. And when I look at this photo, I think, oh my gosh, if I had only known 2 years ago where in the world we would be right now. It feels like this photo was taken light years ago, ages ago. And I was in New Mexico. I was traveling by myself. My daughter was getting ready to graduate high school. Things were feeling really good, positive. The world felt safe in many ways. And I was in a botanical gardens with roses. So I was certainly in my most happiest place. And since then, we've gone through quite an extensive experience as collectives, individuals and human beings on this planet. And we've experienced so much stress and trauma and disheartening energy, loss, grief, sadness, fear, overwhelm over the last 18 months. And we've done so collectively. And I think a lot about how this is really, truly the first time ever in the human experience that we have, as a global family, experienced such a massive upheaval all at once. There's certainly been many times in our past history as human beings where we've suffered from war and famine and injustices and personal traumas and dramas. But the pandemic that we've been navigating over the last 18 months was something that affected our entire global community and all human beings on the planet. And so all of us at once were feeling these collective feelings of fear and overwhelm and uncertainty. And if you're empathetic, which I'm going to venture to guess many of you are, because most of us that seek to walk the path of the healer, that seek out herbal medicine, often do so because we have big hearts, because we're incredibly empathetic, and because we can feel the plight of the world and we can feel our community, our loved ones, and what they're going through. And so this has been a really intense experience. So I just want to start the evening out with just taking one moment, if you feel comfortable, to just close your eyes and just put your hand over your heart if that feels comfortable to you, and see if you can find your heartbeat underneath your hands. and just take a moment to give some love and gratitude to your beautiful, unique, individual, glorious beating heart inside of your chest that does so much work, shares so much love, understands so much compassion and forgiveness, is able to tolerate pain and things that hurt, and also be able to celebrate with joy and love and laughter all of the positive, beautiful human experiences that we get to have. But just take a minute to say thank you to yourself and thank you to your brave heart. And perhaps maybe even a moment of gratitude to just be thankful for being right here, right now on this planet during this time. Even though it feels uncertain, we are so blessed to be here in this beautiful world, the flowers blooming outside and the birds chirping. Nature is continuing to do what she always does. The rebirth of spring is going to come. We're going to have a bountiful summer. And just try to hold the vision of positivity and love in your heart. And remembering that that beautiful heart inside of your chest that's beating right now is beating in synchronicity with each person on this call, with each person in your home or household and in your community, in your state, in this country, and around the world. It's the one thing that unites us all as human beings, and also all of the animals and the winged ones and the fishes and the beautiful creatures that are on this planet. We all have a beautiful heartbeat beating collectively together. And we have the capacity to bring greatness, beauty, joy, pleasure, laughter, and all sorts of healing to this planet. So thank you. Thank your heart. Thank you for being here. Really grateful to be with all of you tonight to share one of my favorite subjects, which is the wonderful world of flower essences. I am quite a big fan of flower essences and flower essence therapy. If you don't know me, my name is Lupo. I am a herbalist and also a flower essence practitioner. I have been an educator in the world of herbalism, flower essences, and natural products for almost 25 years. Flower essences have a very special place in my heart because they are meant to help support the emotional body. And when I first learned about flower essences, I was blown away. When somebody told me, my teacher, for the very first time, I was probably about 19 years old, and I learned that there were these remedies out there that were specific for grief and for pain and for sadness and for overwhelm. I couldn't believe it. I thought, why in the world am I just finding out about this now, this far along in life, especially as such a sensitive individual? And since I found out about flower essences, I can tell you that I really have not shut up about them because I do love them so very much and have found so much healing for myself and for my family. So if flower essences are new to you, we're going to take a few minutes to go over a little brief introduction about flower essences, what they are and how they work. If they're not new to you, it's always good to refresh on the history of this beautiful subject. And then we're going to get into flower essences for self-care, specifically for burnout and compassion fatigue. So let's start with the history of flower essences. Flower essences have been used throughout history and perhaps from the very beginning of time by indigenous people around the globe. Flower essence remedies have been known in India, ancient Egypt, and by the Australian Aboriginals for centuries. The history of using flower essences to heal the emotional imbalances extends back for thousands of years, with the earliest documentations of their use discovered on papyrus scripts in ancient Egypt. So this is not a new form of medicine. This is a very ancient form of medicine. Indigenous Australians also recognized their healing qualities and would use them as part of healing ceremonies to resolve emotional imbalances as well as physical injuries. The earliest European recorded use of flower essences was by the abbess and mystic Hildegard von Bingen in the 12th century, who would place muslin sheets over the flowers at night to absorb their dew, and then she would collect them in the morning, wring them out, and use the dew, the essence of those flowers, to treat people for their emotional imbalances. And just a side note, if you're interested in herbalism and history and any way, shape, or form, and you have never studied up on Hildegard von Bingen, I highly recommend that you do so. She's an amazing figure in history. She's one of the only female figures that we have that dates back this early in time, and really did some tremendous work when it comes to healing. But it was in the 1930s that there was a British physician, and his name was Dr. Edward Bach, and he is the one who pioneered a deeper understanding of these essences. And he created a method, an application of flower essences through his clinical and personal observations. He, along with his team, were responsible for creating the famous 38 Bach flower remedies. So these you may be familiar with. He also created the system that each and every person on the planet that I know of that works with flower essences uses to this day. So he basically systemized an ancient practice. And he was born in 1886. He died in 1936. And they say this is one of the only photos of him. I've never seen any others, but they say this is one of the few photos he was allowed to have taken of himself. He was from England. This picture is of me a few summers ago, sitting at his desk in his home in England. And obviously, I'm quite happy in this picture because it was quite a dream to be able to visit and see the labs and the science and the intuition and all of the beauty that went into creating the system that we all use today, known as flower essence therapy. One of my favorite quotes by Dr. Bach, and I feel like this really sums up what flower essences do for us as individuals, is right here. These remedies cure not by attacking disease, but by flooding our bodies with the beautiful vibration of our highest nature, in the presence of which disease melts as snow in the sunshine. And so he created this beautiful healing modality, pardon me, systemized, I should say, this beautiful healing modality that allows the essences to flood us with the positive virtue needed to wash out the things that are causing us harm, standing in our way, or creating dis-ease. Dr. Bach was born in England in 1886. He was trained as a practiced orthodox medical doctor. He was a bacteriologist and also an immunologist. He discovered the 7 strains of bacterial vaccinations called nosodes, which are still used in modern medicine today. He prepared vaccines from intestinal bacteria of people with chronic disease. And like many folks that find themselves on the healing path, he became disenchanted with modern medicine at that time. And so he left the medical field and went on to study a different type of medicine, which is homeopathy. So you may be familiar with homeopathy, and if you are, you'll find a lot of similarities between homeopathy and flower essences. He practiced in the field of homeopathy for 10 years. He was incredibly highly regarded as a physician and also as a homeopathic doctor. And he had great success in both of these worlds, but he still found, like, he really found that felt that there was something else out there to be found. And so in the early 1930s, he left his very successful practice in London, went out to the countryside of England, and he started gathering wildflowers. Now, the first remedies that he made were similar to some of the predecessors that we spoke of. He worked with the energy of the morning dew on the flowers, and he experimented with that type of energy. He also experimented with working with the sun for solar infusions, with the shade and with the moonlight. And what he found was that sunlight was a very important part of the potentization process when it comes to making flower essences. He used a method of infusing pure water with the healing energies of these gorgeous flowers, and he preserved his formulas with a small amount of brandy, which he considered to be a pure, less adulterated alcohol. He used wooden tweezers to collect his flowers, and he used water always from a live spring. And he made these very simple essences, which are really quite easy to use. I just had a beautiful poppy burst. I've been waiting for this poppy to burst for 4 days in my garden, and it finally burst this morning. And it is quite easy to go outside and to gather that poppy flower and some water and to make flower essences. It really is quite a simple process. It follows the laws of homeopathy where less is more. So this ends up being a highly diluted medicine. But because it's so highly diluted, it goes deeper into the body. So it's really able to reach and affect the emotional body. Some of these bottles that you see up here are the original essences that Dr. Bach made. And again, he made these essences specifically to flood the body with the positive virtue needed to offset the negative one. So if you're taking an essence because you feel very afraid, you're not necessarily taking an essence for fear, you'll be taking the essence of courage. So the essence that you're taking is that of courage. So if you're feeling very afraid, what better attribute to have wash over your being than courage? So remember that flowers in and of themselves only hold the highest and most positive vibration. As human beings, we're all attracted to them. We see them go through this beautiful process, and their medicine is always of the highest and most positive virtue. And that's really basically what Dr. Bach figured out how to collect and to preserve and to utilize as individuals. So why choose flower essences? There's lots of amazing reasons. This photo is one. Just making them is really fun and beautiful. We made these essences a few years ago when we had that partial solar eclipse with one of my level 1 foundations of herbalism classes. And my gardens are in the background there, and all of those flowers are just eager to be made into medicine. It's such a beautiful and easy and fun way of working with plant medicine. So there's lots of different reasons why we choose to use them. But one of my favorite as a practitioner is that they're incredibly safe. They're incredibly safe remedies that can be used by anyone. They can be used by babies, children, elders, animals, and they can also be used by folks that are taking many different pharmaceutical medications. Whereas herbal medicine, that's not always the case. But flower essences, because they're classified as homeopathic, they don't have a drug or herb interaction to them. So this is something that you can give to somebody even if they're taking pharmaceuticals. They can also be used both internally and externally. Oftentimes I'll have one, close to my bed, and I'll take it right before I go to sleep or have it in my pocket and pull it out when I need it. But I also really love to put them into spritzers and sprays. Sometimes I'll put them on pulse points. My dog has some anxiety and abandonment issues. So sometimes I will take some and put it on my fingers and tap it on his ears, or put a little bit on the tip of his nose, or get him to lick my finger. So they really can be used in many, many, many different ways. There's lots of different applications for how to use these essences. So they're safe, they're effective, they're easy to use, and they do not have drug and herb contraindications. So they're incredibly safe. Some of the things that you can expect from flower essence therapy include having a greater peace of mind, calmness during stressful times, increasing joy and pleasure in your life, forgiveness towards not only others, but to ourselves. And oftentimes that's the harder of the two. They can also help foster a deeper connection to self, as well as understanding relationships. They can help us achieve greater clarity, greater focus, and they can help us gain insight into our life's purpose. They can also help us feel revived, re-enlivened. They can bring us back to ourselves. They can help us let go of deep grief, anger, resentment. So they really can do so many things. And as many flowers as there are in the world is as many essences as there are. And so this subject has only really been studied for the last 100 years or so, not even. And so there's so much to learn in this wonderful world of flower essences. Most of the time, what folks want to know right off the bat is how quickly do they work? And it really depends on the individual, and it also depends on the situation. So in an acute situation, a flower essence may have an immediate effect. So you had something happen and you got startled or scared, and you went to go grab your aspen, which is really helpful for the anxiety that just happened to you. You would feel the effects immediately. If you've suffered from anxiety your entire life and you're going to try using flower essences for anxiety, that's more of a chronic issue. You may have to use the flower essences for a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks to really start to see real results. So when you're thinking about how flower essences work, you really want to consider if it's an acute situation or a chronic situation. And then there's a fine line between the two. So the topic that we're talking about tonight, burnout and compassion fatigue, there's a tipping point where that happens, you know. Is it chronic or is it acute? How long have you noticed that this has been going on? If it's been going on for more than a couple of weeks, I would consider that to be an acute situation. I'm sorry, a chronic situation. Essences are only positive. So that's really important to remember. The essences are only positive. They help to dissolve, like snow melting in the sunshine, negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions. If for some reason you choose the wrong flower essence, you won't feel any effects. So you don't have to worry if you've accidentally chosen the wrong one or you're not sure which one to use. There's lots of different holistic complementary activities such as journaling, meditating, using affirmations while you're taking your flower essences that can be really beneficial to the healing process. And last but not least, the standard dose for flower essences. So we're going to talk about a lot of these tonight. So if you decide tomorrow that you want to head out and get some or make some or come to the apothecary and have us put a formula together for you, just remember that the standard dose is 4 drops 4 times a day. That's for the chronic. That's for something that's been going on for a while. But you can also use them as often as needed, especially for acute episodes. All right, so that's the nuts and bolts and just a really quick snapshot of what flower essences are and how they work for us in the body. I have spent my lifetime talking about this and could easily go on for hours and hours about the wonderful world of flower essences, but we have lots of different courses if you're interested in taking a deeper dive, and we'll talk about that in just a little while. But for now, let's focus on why we're all here tonight. And that's to talk about both burnout and compassion fatigue. So, what is burnout? By definition, burnout is a state of emotional, physical, mental, and I would argue spiritual exhaustion that can be caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So, when we're under a specific amount of stress for a certain amount of time, eventually we get to the state of just being burned out. And what does it feel like to be burnt out? These are generally feelings that you'll associate with being overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet the constant demands of whatever's happening in your world. I've used a lot of beautiful photos tonight of these wilted flowers, and it's kind of the way that we feel when we're burnt out. So if we forget to water one of our plants, what happens to it, right? It just sort of droops, it loses its energy, it looks tired, it loses its color, it's exhausted. You know, it doesn't have that vitality, that life force. And then when we water our plants, all of a sudden they come back in to themselves. They're vital, they're bright, they're colorful, they're shiny, they're holding their heads up. And so this is a really beautiful example of burnout. And we may feel like those plants sometimes where we have not been fed enough, or perhaps our cup, our emotional, spiritual, mental, or physical cup is empty. We've given away too much and we haven't been able to refill. And this is what causes burnout. So, some of the most common signs of burnout include alienation from our usual activities. So, the things that we normally have the vitality to do and the demands that we're met with every day really don't seem like that big of a deal. Suddenly, we find ourselves just not wanting to engage. Individuals that are experiencing burnout will view their jobs, perhaps their lifestyle, or whatever everyday demands or needs that need to be met as increasingly stressful and frustrating. They may grow cynical about their working conditions, their home life, or their relationships, and also perhaps with the people that surround them. They may also emotionally distance themselves and begin to feel numb about their current situation. And I don't know about any of you, but I've experienced all of those things in the last 6 months. For me, I worked really hard during the height of the pandemic. because we kept our businesses open and we just had a lot of demands to meet. And it wasn't until it wasn't until this winter that I really started to feel these signs of just being deeply burnt out, just kind of wanting to stay in bed longer than usual, not wanting to engage, not wanting to really put myself out there. And everyday tasks were feeling a lot more stressful than usual. This is a good symptom that these are some good signs, I should say, that you are feeling burnt out. So there's also physical symptoms. Chronic stress can lead to physical symptoms, including headaches, stomach aches, or intestinal issues. But I would say, as an herbalist, pay attention to where your weaknesses in the body are anyway. If you have something like arthritis, are you noticing that your arthritis is getting worse? If you normally only get headaches once a month, now you're getting them every week. You know, if you're feeling more aches or pains, if you have something that normally bothers you a little bit, but it's bothering you much more, these are all physical symptoms of burnout because the body is exhausted. We also can experience emotional exhaustion, which to me sometimes feels even more intense than the physical symptoms. Burnout causes people to feel drained, unable to cope, tired all of the time, and oftentimes will lack the energy to get their work done. I would venture to guess that caffeine sales are through the roof over the last year and a half. I think a lot of people are probably trying to make themselves push themselves harder and feel better. And that's really only going to work for the short term and, quite honestly, cause more problems down the road. Whereas flower essences can really bring us back into our own vitality. Burnout may also cause reduced performance as far as work goes. Like, even myself, and maybe you're hearing it in my voice, I teach all of the time. I've been stumbling over my words the last 6 months more so than usual. And that's okay because I'm exhausted just like everyone else. But for me, that's something that I notice. So usually I can teach quite fluidly, but a lot of times in the last 6 months or so, I've really noticed that I'm stumbling over my words. Or I go to write a letter or write a description about an herb, and I've completely lost a word that I use all of the time. It's just gone. It doesn't exist in my head anymore. Names, oh my gosh, I like wish everyone's name was tattooed on their forehead at this point. And so these are little things, but my performance is reduced. There's no question about it. And so that may be something that you're seeing at work. You may be noticing at home. Any of the things that you normally do every day with ease are feeling a little bit more difficult. Also, individuals with burnout may feel negative about those tasks. So it's something you do every day. You have to sweep or, take out the dog or for a walk or whatever it is, but you're feeling more frustrated about these little tasks. And then last but not least, this is a big one, and we were just really speaking to it, is that folks that have burnout have difficulty concentrating, and also will lack creativity. So I would say, if you're experiencing burnout, maybe not the best time to write your novel, or don't beat yourself up if you're normally this incredible artist who can just flow so fluidly with all of these different mediums and you're feeling stuck. That's okay. What needs to be addressed is the burnout. It's not your artist self. It's not your creativity. That is the problem. It's that we need to be deeply nourished so that we can come back into that vital creative part of ourself. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to do 3 or 4 essences for each. So we're going to start with burnout. And right off the bat, this is the essence that I'm taking right now personally. The first essence that, well, actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm taking this essence too. So the first essence that we should always consider whenever we're feeling like we're having a hard time, we're struggling, things are feeling like they're too much, is Rescue Remedy or 5-flower formula. This is the only formula that Dr. Bach ever created. It's 5 different essences. They were put together to make this beautiful synergistic formula that just helps us regroup in the moment, that helps bring us back to ourselves, that helps us resist the excess stress, that sometimes helps us prevents us from losing our shit altogether. This is a magic, magic remedy. And if you've never used Dr. Bach's emergency formula, also known as Rescue Remedy and 5-flower formula, I really suggest that that's the essence that you start with. It is a blend, 5 different essences. I always tell people if they really want to know how well it works, next time you get on an airplane and you're experiencing turbulence, take 5 flower formula, or if it's a time where you would normally be really shaken by something, that's when you want to use it. And what happens when you use this beautiful formula is that the plane may still be shaking, or whatever it is that's caused you to be upset may still be happening, but you maintain composure. And that's the important part. We're going to really stay focused on the spiritual, but remember that when we have these heightened um, emotional instances in our body, it does affect us physically. And if that happens over and over and over again, eventually these emotional issues are going to start to affect the physical body. So 5 flower formula is a really great way to keep yourself grounded. There are 5 different essences in there. Star of Bethlehem, we're going to talk about in depth in just a bit. This is the essence for peace. It just brings in a sense of peace. Cherry plum is the essence for calm. This is the essence for when you feel like you're going to freak out in the grocery store and just, shove your cart across into the, mile high thing of tin cans or whatever. Just have that moment where you just think you're going to freak out in your mind. Cherry plum really helps us to remain calm and centered. Impatience is just like the name suggests. It keeps us calm. It keeps us patient. Rock rose is the essence of safety. So this is the essence that allows us to feel safe in our own being and safe in our own body. And clematis is the essence that allows us to stay grounded, present, and embodied. Sometimes when we have shocking things happen to us, we can like almost leave our body, bad news, a car accident, whatever, where we sort of just feel like out of it. Clematis keeps us very grounded. So if you're experiencing burnout and you've never used any essences before, this is a really great place to start. 4 drops 4 times a day, and see how you feel in a week from now, a day from now, a couple right after you take it. Notice, especially if you end up in a stressful response, or maybe it's something that's happening at work that's like triggering that for you. Notice the next time you're in that scenario, how you feel. And the difference will be that you remain calm and centered, even though the chaos is still happening around us. I haven't figured out yet the blend to like make the chaos around us stop yet. But when I do, it will be really great for everybody and I will be a billionaire. All right, so the essence that I wanted to say that first comes to mind when I first thought about teaching this class, the essence that I'm taking personally myself right now is aloe. And one of my favorite things about plants and plant medicine is that the plants themselves really do tell us what they're good for just by how they look, where they're growing, their color, their shape, etc. Some of you are familiar with the concept of the doctrine of signatures, which really says that spirit or creator marked these plants for us silly humans to be able to figure out what they're good for. And if there's one thing that most people know, it's that aloe is really good for sunburns, right? For burns, for being burnt. So it only makes sense that aloe's flower essence is good for when we are on a soul level burnt, fried, exhausted. You know how sun poisoning makes you feel, or sunburn makes you feel, where you're just so deeply exhausted? It's the same kind of exhaustion that deep emotional pain and anguish will make you feel. And so here is this beautiful flower. And yes, aloes do flower, maybe not here where I'm at in Connecticut, but I was just in Florida last week and they have these gorgeous yellow flowers. Yellow to me is always going to be indicative of helping us shine brighter. And so aloe is my first go-to for burnout. I'm taking this essence right now in one of my herbal formulas, and I've been taking it for about a week. And I'll tell you that one of the things that I feel from taking it is exhaustion. And it's not that the essence is making me feel exhausted, it's that the essence is nudging me to get my rest, to rest from the burnout. So with all of these essences, I'm going to list the positive qualities and then what we call the patterns of imbalance. This is from my friends at FES, Flower Essence Services in Nevada City, California. They're a wonderful company. I highly recommend them. We carry all of their essences in the apothecary. And the 2 ways we can look at the essence is the positive energy, the positive qualities of what it gives us, and then the patterns of imbalance, which is why we would want to take it in the first place. So the good medicine, the positive medicine that aloe brings to us is creative activity integrated with vital life energy. This is the essence of vitality. of being able to return to a vital self. It's about active expression, and it's got this fiery energy to it. So it brings us out of this place of feeling burnt, feeling tired, and brings us back into our true self and helps us find our true soul fire. So this is for people that are feeling like they're working too hard, like they are burning the candles at both ends. If you hear someone say something like that, if they're burnt out in general, and for those of us that are workaholics, and my name is Lupo and I am a workaholic. So this is my patron essence. I really find this plant to be so deeply nourishing, and this essence brings us back. It cools us down and it allows us to get our rest. We now, this class that we're talking about tonight, the burnout is really from all of the extra emotional stress that we've had to handle that's made it so those everyday tasks feel so different. And aloe can help soothe that. Think about how soothing that plant is on a physical level. Whatever a plant does to the physical body, that flower essence will do to the emotional body. So think about being able to take beautiful aloe and rubbing it all over your spirit, soothing it, lubing it all up, making it all soft and fluid and comfortable, really just such a positive essence to work with. So after 5-flower formula, this is my number one go-to for burnout. I'm also quite a big fan of chamomile. Chamomile flower essence is like having a cup of chamomile tea, but for the spirit and soul instead of the physical body. And the reason I include chamomile here is because I shouldn't say most, but so many individuals that experience burnout, which is secondary to stress, end up having stomach issues. And that's because we have so many tens of thousands of nerves in our gut. And when our nervous system is fried, burnt out, and not working well, our digestive system is the next thing to suffer. And so many people that are stressed or burnt out also have stomach issues. I also find that very sensitive individuals, which I know that many of us on here today are, also have very sensitive digestive systems. You may feel butterflies in your stomach more often than others, or feel your intuition really strongly in your gut or in that solar plexus. And so chamomile is a really beautiful essence to add to your repertoire. So the positive qualities of chamomile are serene, sunny-like disposition, which is all good and well. I'm growing this plant outside. It's so happy. It's like happy as can be. What I love most about this essence, though, is that it brings in emotional balance. So it's not about being happy all the time or being sad all the time. It's about the balance. It's about being able to ebb and flow and move through all of the things that we go through in this lifetime. And if you've ever really enjoyed a cup of chamomile tea and afterwards been able to like relax into your body and drift off to sleep, that same energy is what chamomile essence gives us. So this is going to be for the individual who's easily upset, things are irritating them. They may feel moody or that their emotions are not balanced. Also, for folks that have an inability or really having a hard time releasing emotional tension, they're holding it in the body. We hold emotional tension a lot of times in our gut. And so that really helps us to relax that emotional tension. And so anything that somebody's feeling energetically in their solar plexus or in their stomach, chamomile is really going to help support that. So again, a really nice soothing essence to help with the feelings of stress and burnout. And then I decided to add Hornbeam. This is an essence that there's two essences I'm going to talk about tonight that I don't use all of the time over the past 20 years or so of working with essences. They're ones I use few and far between for very specific reasons. But since COVID and since we've had so many folks coming in with similar scenarios to how they're feeling, there's two essences that I've been using much more than usual. And Hornbeam is one of them. I used to describe Hornbeam to my students and still do as the Monday morning blues. Like you wake up, it's Monday. Remember how Garfield was like back in the 80s, like in, the comics, like you don't want to go anywhere. You're like barely making your coffee. It's just kind of like blah. You're feeling like blah. Well, burnout does that to us. When we're burnt out, we don't have that same vitality to wake up and greet the day. And so maybe the Monday morning blues are now the Monday through Sunday morning blues. And we just don't have that same like stamina and wherewithal that we normally have. And the hornbeam is a beautiful tree. You can find it growing throughout the East Coast here in the United States. And it has a very irregular flower. As you can see here, it doesn't look like a traditional flower, but it still is a very powerful flower. I always like to think of the tree essences as incredibly grounding. So right off the bat, like anytime you choose to work with a flower essence that's growing on a tree, you're going to have some deep roots there. So you're going to have some nice grounding energy. And so hornbeam grounds us, but it grounds us into our daily tasks. It allows us to become or it prevents us, I should say, from becoming disenchanted with the everyday things. What it does is it gives us steady and steadfast energy. If there, in essence, had to be an adaptogen, for those of you that are herbalists, you know that term, hornbeam would be the adaptogen. It helps us adapt to the stress. It helps to give us a steady amount of energy to get through the day. And so this is going to be for anybody who's feeling fatigued, tired, and especially folks that just don't want to do or not enjoying or having a really hard time completing daily tasks and responsibilities. And when you take hornbeam, it floods us with the ability to be able to just get things done, to give us this level of energy that we need to get through the mundane tasks. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about compassion fatigue. I will be honest with you all, this is a new term for me. I only learned about this term this year or maybe last year. And my therapist was the one who shared it with me. And I'll be very honest with you. She asked me to look into it. She said, Lupo, have you heard of compassion fatigue? It's a very real phenomenon. And many of the therapists are seeing it happen right now, especially after COVID and all of these really intense experiences that we've all just gone through. And basically, what compassion fatigue is an indifference to charitable appeals on behalf of those who are suffering, experienced as a result of the frequency or number of such appeals. And I just want to share with you what my experience was with that. So I would say for me, it began with maybe about 5 years ago or so, a few years after the Sandy Hook shootings. It seems like whether for me, because I'm from Newtown and that's just so close, it was a very close tragedy to my heart and to my home. But also it seemed that after that, from in my own mind, that so many tragedies and events and natural disasters and climate change and all of these things, just everything seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And it wasn't even just that the tragedies and the experiences were worse, it was that they were more frequent. And we work in the apothecary. Many of you know we run a really beautiful apothecary, and a big part of our mission is to help as much as we can. So anytime there was a flood or a hurricane or a shooting or whatever it was, we're gathering herbs and sending them out. I remember a point a couple of years ago looking at Becca, my wonderful, beloved teacher and ally in this beautiful twin star adventure we have, and saying, I don't even know who to help right now. There are so many things happening that I don't even know who to help. And it felt overwhelming, like you didn't even know which tragedy to focus on. And it seems like that kind of kept going. And then we came into COVID and you had people suffering all around you, personally close to you, the thousands and thousands of people. When we had those numbers in New York, I'm every day, my heart, I just couldn't even, I could feel it. I'm so sensitive. And the loss that I suffered in my own life, it just felt like it was more than I could handle. And there was a part of me that shut down. There was a part of me that just started to disassociate. And I am a very loving, compassionate person who is very much involved in helping and healing. It's been my entire life's mission. But I just started to feel like I can't do it anymore. I can't think about it. I can't see it. I don't want to know what's happening anymore. And that's when my therapist was like, that's very normal. And I want to say that to any of you that are experiencing that. That's a very normal and okay feeling to have for your spirit and your soul to say, I'm going to take a step back for a minute because it's too much is happening. That isn't, we should allow ourselves permission to do that. But it really is that we become so exhausted by all of the compassion that we felt that it's almost like we run out, as if we had a cup of compassion and so much of it had to go out and out and out and out to where the cup was empty. And where is that compassion going to come from? And so that's really what compassion fatigue is. You're very tired and exhausted from feeling so much of the plight of the world. This could be happening on an individual level too. If you've ever had a loved one that's had a long illness and then passed, that can certainly cause compassion fatigue. Anytime that we're just emotionally giving so much of ourselves and sharing so much of ourselves with others and their plight. And when that ends, or even before it ends, sometimes we become exhausted. So compassion fatigue is also known as secondhand shock or secondary stress reaction. And I think that's important to note. So this is like a secondhand shock to what's happening. And it describes a type of stress that results from helping or wanting to help those who are traumatized or under significant emotional duress. And these are the definitions by nature. But I would add to this, in my opinion, that it also comes from when you can't help. And how many of us have felt helpless in the last 18 months, especially when we were on lockdown, especially when we couldn't even leave our house and go hug, our parents or our beloveds or whoever. So it creates this very special kind of stress. And it doesn't mean that we're not compassionate. It doesn't mean that we're not loving. It doesn't mean that we don't have big hearts anymore. It just means that those tender hearts that we gave thanks to in the beginning, that they're tired and that they're exhausted. And so there are essences for that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing, because this is a big piece of the puzzle here. Because compassion fatigue can take a physical, mental, spiritual, and or emotional toll on the individual. So there are lots of different symptoms for this. Chronic physical and emotional exhaustion. I mean, check, right? We probably all are experiencing that. Depersonalization. Perhaps that's something that you've noticed, that you've become a little bit more closed off than normal, that you've retreated more. I've always been a real extrovert, and I find myself being more of an introvert these days. Feelings of inequity towards the therapeutic or caregiver relationship. So maybe you have something going on with either being the caregiver or being the caretaker. Irritability, check. Feeling irritable because we have so much to think about emotionally that we don't have as much room to find the way to compassion as quickly, especially if we're running out of it. This one I think is a big one, feelings of self-contempt. And this is what I hear from so many of my clients, customers, students, and I've experienced myself, is that a lot of us are just feeling really badly about ourselves right now, beating ourselves up. I hear that all the time. Beating myself up. I'm so hard on myself. I'm really, and this is a true symptom of compassion fatigue. So if it's something you've never experienced before and you're experiencing it now, this may be what's happening with you. It may be just an effect of or a symptom of the compassion fatigue. Difficulty sleeping, check. Weight loss for me, I had the opposite, so I don't really know what to say, but anytime anybody really has significant weight loss, it's something that you really do want to pay attention to. It is, I'm just joking about it because there's so many of us that had the opposite effect during COVID. But if you do know someone who loses weight rather quickly, that's a red flag. That's something to pay attention to. Headaches, and then poor job satisfaction, which kind of goes back to the burnout. So you can see how compassion fatigue and burnout are very close. It's like stress comes first, then comes the burnout. And then while you're burnt out, you have all of this continual stuff that's coming your way. And that's when the compassion fatigue comes in. And this is a very real dis-ease. And it also is something that can be treated and can be recognized. And for those of you that don't know about compassion fatigue or didn't know about it until tonight, and you're experiencing any of these things, what the easiest way back to health and wellness is through taking care of ourselves and recognizing that these feelings of self-contempt, not being able to sleep, being irritable with other people, there's nothing wrong with us. We've just gone through a lot. We've just all gone through quite a lot. So let's talk about these beautiful plant friends. I mean, just this picture alone makes you feel better, doesn't it? Just immediately, it's just medicine. They're just this, in my opinion, this is why the plants are here. The plants are here to heal us and to take care of us and to help us remember the parts of ourselves that get lost during times of trauma and drama. So I would say that another essence that I love greatly and I work with quite a bit, this is one I keep in my bathroom and I put in my bathtub all the time. This is olive. And this would be my number one go-to. If you were just going to use one essence for compassion fatigue, it would be olive. And that is because olive is all about healing the deep emotional exhaustion. So do you know the feeling that you have, like if you've ever had a really hard cry and just cried and cried and cried for, however long, 20 minutes, a half an hour, and then afterwards the exhaustion that you feel. That's when you need the medicine of olive. Olive is for deep, deep, deep emotional exhaustion. And its positive attributes help rejuvenate our own life force. They work on a deep, deep energetic level, and they allow for us to come back into ourselves and to find a sense of well-being. So hold on to that key phrase with olive. It brings us back to a sense of well-being where we don't feel like we're drowning anymore, but we feel like we can be vital again. It also allows us to have this ability to cultivate the conditions for deep rest and renewal, which is partially what I'm finding between using the olive and the aloe, is that I've become so exhausted that I have to take a nap. And for those of you that know me well, taking a nap is not a normal part of my routine, but my body is just like, we're going to sleep. And I really believe the essences are helping me nurture myself and to take that rest. I spent all day Saturday in bed, the entire day. And I can't remember the last time I did that, but my body needs that. So folks that have gone through long standing or emotional turmoil, and that leaves us emotionally exhausted and then also physically depleted. We really physically don't, we might get tired just walking up a flight of stairs, like we're emotionally drained and physically depleted. So if your fatigue feels really emotional, but also physical, olive is a really great essence for you to take on the daily. The patterns of imbalance are going to include exhaustion or physical collapse, usually due to extreme demands on one's physical forces, resistance, and finally a resistance to deep rest. And that's an important part of this equation too, is that sometimes when we're in trauma, our fight or flight kicks in and we just got to keep going, got to keep moving, got to keep helping. And then we're resisting that rest. And then it's, then the whole thing gets thrown off and it's really hard to fall back into the pattern of taking care of ourselves. So olive nurtures us. And I'm a big fan of olives in general. Like if that was my diet, if I had a dying meal, it would be a bowl of olives. But I think about the way they make me feel when I eat them. They're so like oily and they're so nutritive and they're so nourishing. And even just olive oil, how generous this plant is and gives us this oil that nurtures our entire body inside and out. That's what this essence does, but for the soul and for the spirit. Okay, this is the other essence that I don't use that often, or at least haven't in the last 20 years or so, but I've used it so much for myself and also individuals over the last, 6 to 8 months. And this essence is called sweet chestnut. It's a chestnut tree. This is a tree flower. So again, remember that grounded energy. And this is an essence that gives us returns us to a deep spiritual faith. And I used to give this essence. I use this essence oftentimes for people that were suicidal or had suicidal tendencies, for people that had lost all hope beyond depression, like at the place of just wanting to give up. I found that in the last, year or so working with individuals, there's a lot of people that were brought to this place. We've actually lost a lot of people to suicide in the last couple of years because of the many of the factors contributed to by COVID. So this is, Dr. Bach used to call this essence the dark, for folks that were experiencing the dark night of the soul, when you just can't see the light, you can't find the light anymore. And what it does is it restores our faith in being able to come back after adversity. It brings us back from this deep, dark place and it shows us the light again. It's definitely something I would consider to be like an antidepressant essence, and certainly for folks that things feel very dark for them. And so I luckily, in all the years of my practice, I didn't have to use this that much. It was only for those times folks told me they were at their edge. Now there's a lot of people at their edge, and so I'm using this essence. And what I find too is that it helps to bring back the sweetness of life, where we can remember that, look outside the window right now and really appreciate those flowers that are blooming, or hear that bird song, or be able to, really taste that cup of tea that we're taking down. So sweet chestnut works to heal severe emotional trauma from challenging life conditions. It helps to build and restore endurance and perseverance, even in the most difficult of situations. So this has become a new favorite essence for myself, for my loved ones, and for my community. And then we have Star of Bethlehem, which she was just blooming here in the Northeast. So some of you may have found this beauty growing, this wildflower growing in your area. She is a spring beauty. You may remember that she's one of the essences that we talked about with Five Flower Formula and Rescue Remedy. This is the essence that I consider to be the essence of peace. Some of the languaging that I tend to use with Star of Bethlehem, if it works for you, keep it. If it doesn't, don't. But I always think of Christ consciousness. I think of this really blinding white light, this just real beautiful, holy light that is just so white and light filled that it just clears away everything. I think of like when people are on their deathbed and say they see the light. This is what I think of when I think of Star of Bethlehem. It's the essence of peace, great peace. And it's an essence that we want to use after great shock or trauma. And what's really important to remember with Star of Bethlehem is that that can be recent shock or trauma. That could also be shock and trauma that happened to us 20 years ago. Either way, this essence is going to work. We may work with it a little bit differently if it's acute or chronic as far as dosaging, but it's still going to help heal the trauma. It's going to bring in the peace, and it helps to unify ourselves and find our own inner divinity. I think that this essence, Dr. Bach called this essence the great comforter. Sometimes I think of a big white fluffy blanket being wrapped around your shoulders, or a grandmother wrapping you and holding you in their arms. Or when my kids were little, I used to love when they got out of the pool and you wrap them in a towel and they let you hold them while they shivered, and that feeling of just being wrapped. That's what Star of Bethlehem gives us. I have a very close relationship with this essence. It was my great comforter. My son almost died when he was 10, and this was the essence that really held me through such a difficult time. My son is going to be 24 this year and living his best life in Atlanta. But at that time, it was probably one of the most difficult things I went through. And this essence literally showed up all around my house for me. And I started working with it and it held me. And this is the essence that you want to use that holds you through the things that you just don't know how you'll ever make it through. So the deep loss, the deep grief, if you've lost a loved one recently, if you're experiencing deep grief, or if you're remembering or ready to work on something from the past that stayed with you, this is a beautiful essence to work with. And again, if flower essences are new to you and you decide to just start with the rescue remedy, remember that inside of the rescue remedy is the Star of Bethlehem. So that's a great way to start working with it.
Did you feed Wolfie?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. I love you. Bye, sweetheart. Okay. Next, we have wild rose. And my roses are blooming right now. And this is such a wonderful, special time of year. So this is wild rose. And this is the essence that I'll generally use for folks or for myself when we're feeling resigned, apathetic, who gives a shit. I kind of feel like this essence in some ways is the definition of compassion fatigue. It's like you just kind of you don't want to engage anymore. There's a part of ourselves that's lost, and again, it's not because we're not loving, deep, compassionate individuals. It's because we've experienced something that's caused us to pull back from that, or maybe our well is dry. And so this essence is all about the will to live. This essence is all about engaging in life. This essence is all about being committed to the path, to the journey, no matter how difficult it is. And what my favorite thing about roses is that I find that they are so soft and so healing and total heart medicine. This is the essence, obviously, for the heart. We've known that it's the most romantic flower. We've known that from the beginning of time. And I will say that I do believe that the saying, a rose is a rose is a rose, is a very true statement. Any rose that you ever meet will open the heart's capacity to love. And you think of those tight little buds that they start off in, and the way that they unfold and unfurl. And then look inside this flower, you see this yellow, you see bright, you see excitement. It looks like fireworks. That's the energy that it's pulling out. And I always think of these as crowns. And I like to think about rose being the initiator of allowing ourselves to sit on the throne of our own hearts, to sit and rule our own hearts from a place of joy and happiness. I don't have this in my formula, but I'm talking myself into putting this in my formula after we get off tonight, because this is a really beautiful essence to work with. I work with roses all of the time. One of my favorite formulas that we have in the apothecary is our rescue rose, and it's a rose elixir, very sweet rose glycerate elixir that we make with fresh roses, and then we put rescue remedy in there. So a really beautiful combination for compassion fatigue right now as well. But this is one of those flower remedies that almost everybody can benefit from. I mean, almost everyone can use some kind of help right now, just sort of re-engaging. This is also a flower to me that's a lot about re-emerging, rebirthing, and we're coming into whatever this new normal is. And so this is an essence that could really be a great ally for us. It really restores our vitality, our spontaneity, our creativity, and really just our overall happiness. So a really fantastic one to take, to put it in your bath, put rose petals in your bath. The more roses, the better, in my opinion. And then I added Self-Heal here. Self-Heal is a very special flower. She grows everywhere here in the Northeast as a common weed. Her Latin name is Prunella vulgaris, and she is, like I said, quite common, but really extraordinary at the same time. So you may find this plant growing outside in a park or your backyard or a neighborhood, especially if it's in an area that's not sprayed with any chemicals. And she's not blooming quite yet, at least not in my yard, but she will be within the next maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And so an essence that we have can easily access. And the name tells us a lot. Her name is Self-Heal, also sometimes called Heal All. And this plant in herbal medicine was used as a panacea, meaning that it was used for just about every single physical dis-ease, disharmony that you can think of. And so that speaks a lot just to the testament of the plant in and of itself as an herb. But as an essence, it works a little bit differently. And when I was writing this lecture today or putting this presentation together, I was thinking about, who was missing? She was the last one I added. And I said, oh, self-heal. Because really, this journey is about us healing and taking care of ourselves. At the end of the day, we only truly have ourselves, as scary as a concept of that is. It's really all we have is this right here, this beautiful heart, this body. And it really is up to us. And I know that for myself, throughout the last few months of really dealing with like post-COVID depression or whatever you want to call it, I've had to wake up every morning and just like talk myself into getting out the door, talk myself into getting out of bed. Come on, you can do it, one step in front of the other. Self-heal is the essence that really taps into our own vital life force and encourages us to take care of ourselves. And it's not just to take care of ourselves to get out of bed. It's self-heal will help us get out of bed, go downstairs, make a really nice cup of nettle tea, take all your adaptogens, maybe put on your exercise video for a minute. Like self-heal is like, we're doing it. We're not just getting out of bed. Like we're going to do it. We're going big or we're going home, and we're going to take care of ourselves. When I was a young herbalist and I first learned about flower essences, I put self-heal in every single one of my clients' formulas. I should tell my practitioner training students this. Um, with their consent, of course, but I would make them these herbal formulas, and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to take it, but if I put self-heal flower essence in there, they'll take it, because every time they go to take their medicine, they're going to get this burst of taking care of themselves. And so it would keep them up with the regimen that I wanted them to take. I don't do that as much anymore, but perhaps I should, or at least for myself. So this essence is all about taking care of ourselves, bringing back that wellness to ourselves, bringing back that sense of wholeness. When we are in tough places emotionally, physically, when we are suffering from stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue, we feel like shit, bottom line. We don't feel good. And self-heal is going to help us put into practice the things that make us feel good. It's going to have us go for that walk outside when we don't feel like it. It's going to encourage us to get on a phone and call a dear beloved friend who makes us feel better. It's going to encourage us to cook a really good meal for ourselves when we feel like going to bed or eating popcorn and having wine instead. I don't do that. So the patterns of imbalance are the inability to take inner responsibility for one's healing, lacking in spiritual motivation for wellness, and overly dependent on external advice for health choices. So it brings the power back to ourselves, and it gives us the ability to tap into our own bodies, our own souls, to take care of our lifestyles and to make really healthy lifestyle choices. Such a fantastic plant. If you join us for any of our plant walks next month, in our June plant walk, or in July for sure, you'll be bound to meet this plant. There are quite a few lookalikes, so be sure you have the proper identification. There's a lot of little plants that look similar to this, but she's abundant and she's around and she is available, and yeah, she's a great one to work with. So those are my essences and my ideas for flower essences for burnout and compassion fatigue. I didn't, if you know me, I could easily talk about this for the next 3 days. But tonight I wanted to just give you just enough so that it wasn't too overwhelming. My hope for you is that one of those essences spoke to you, and or maybe more than one. And if one spoke to you, grab it, go get it. We sell them at the apothecary. You can order them online. If you have it growing in your backyard, perhaps you'll be inspired to make one. If more than one called out to you, make a formula. If you don't have the capacity to do it yourself, we'll do it for you at the apothecary. We have lots of wonderful folks that are really well versed in flower essences that work with us, so we'll be happy to help you. But one of the things that I want to share on a personal note is that this modality of healing is so needed. And I've always felt like this modality is needed more now than ever, but now more and more now than ever, right? Like it's always felt so imperative and so important to really work on the emotional part of ourselves. And we've seen through the history of medicine and the history of herbalism and then in modern medicine, the way that we separate out spirit from science. It's sort of like the ongoing argument, which to me is just absolutely ridiculous, because I believe that science is really just trying to prove what spirit already knows, but that's just my opinion. But either way, like science and spirit, they should be together. When we're healing somebody's physical issues, we should be addressing their emotional, and when they have something going on emotionally, we should be paying attention to how it's affecting the physical. And this is where flower essences come in. As a practitioner of almost 20 years of herbal medicine, I can tell you that every single chronic illness I have ever seen, and every single one has an emotional component attached to it. Whether the emotional component was there first, which often happens, or it came after having some physical issues, either way, there are some big emotions attached and connected to and dancing with our physical bodies. And so flower essences are the way that we can really help address those emotional needs. And as a flower essence practitioner, I can tell you that there's not a lot of us. I train flower essence practitioners every year. I train, a dozen or so, but I train hundreds, if not at this point, thousands of herbalists. And so this is a very specialized field. This is something where if you feel called to this, I really encourage you to take up the call. I really encourage you to study more, to learn more, to take some classes, to do a deeper dive, whether it's for yourself personally or your community, or, for perhaps even a profession one day. But this is a field that's growing, and that we really need more people talking about flower essences and using flower essences, especially because we don't have to worry about those drug and herb interactions. So I'm quite pleased to share what I know with all of you tonight. And I'm really happy that you've joined me. And then so many of you have been reaching out about our flower essence practitioner training. We did just graduate our most recent group last month, so I just need a little bit of time to get it out on the calendar. But if you've taken our art flower essence therapy course, that is a prerequisite, and you're interested in becoming a flower essence practitioner, that is coming 2022. I may even put it on the calendar for the very end of this year. And eventually we will have an online version of that as well. But those flower essence practitioners, they are needed. And this medicine is just so special and so important. So I'm really grateful that I had a moment to share things with you all tonight and share a little bit about the wonderful world of flower essence therapy. I'm grateful that all of you were on here, and I appreciate you joining us.